Hello. Today's tarot lecture is on the Star, which is one of my favorite cards in the major arcana, if you can have favorites. To review what we looked at in the previous videos, we had the Death card, which was the overcoming of the fear of mortality. We had the Devil card, which was the breaking down process, and the Temperance or Art card, which is likewise a part of that. And then there's the Tower, where with the foundations of your entire ego having been lost, there's this collapse, and in that moment of collapse, that's where you see this thunderbolt, this divine thunderbolt that falls onto the house of God. So this is symbolic of that moment of the collapse of the ego. It's a moment of grace, and so it has not much to do, in fact, with your actions, as much as that you create a situation where those actions, where that grace is capable of occurring. And likewise, when you have the Tower event occur, then what you can do about it is based on your reactions afterwards, and the Star deals with that. The Star is the moment of your surrender in the face of that divine thunderbolt. Because the fact is that, as I mentioned in the Tower video, a lot of people will face these Tower moments in their lives and they won't be capable of doing that surrendering. They won't be able to let go, or let go all of themselves, or let go completely. And so instead what happens is that they hold back, they try to rebuild, they build on the rubble, or they wallow in their pathetic feeling of self-pitying, but they don't surrender. And so they reconstruct their tower sooner or later after a lot of effort, and the whole thing happens over again. You have a choice in the face of the Tower event, in the face of awakening, as to whether you will accept that awakening or not. And the choice is not a positive choice in the sense of it's something you make an effort to do. It's actually a negative choice. It's a choice of when the moment where you give up, the moment where you say, okay, I'm not going to keep fighting this. There's the story of the Buddha's enlightenment, the Buddha's own enlightenment, which has sometimes been misinterpreted, because you'll sometimes hear people talk about how the Buddha, he was a student, obviously, for many, many years, an ascetic. He had found the hard path, and then he'd found the easy path, and then he found the middle path, which was the one that he felt was working for him, right? And eventually, in his, I would think, in his frustration, because this was an experience that I felt too, right? He became more and more distressed that he could not make his awakening happen, his moment of Buddhahood just happened because of his own greatness, you know. And so in his determination at one point, he sat beneath the Bodhi tree and he meditated for the entire night. And some people say this like that was his great impressive act, was sitting and meditating for his entire night. I say that was his failing to deal with the Tower issue, right? He was trying to force his awakening on his terms and the way he saw it. He was building a tower that night. He was making this great effort out of a frustration. And he was doing this and nothing was happening. And he was coming to this confrontation of the fact that nothing was happening. It wasn't the fact that the Buddha meditated for the entire night that awakened him. It was the exact moment at the end of that night where he gave up, where he let go, where he just relaxed. And then suddenly there was this moment of an explosion of light where he had given the space for awakening to happen. He had let all of himself out. And that's what the star is about. It's this moment of a total surrendering. The imagery of the star gives certain symbolic connotations. I'm trying to put this where you can see it there. The image of the star is of a woman naked in almost all versions of the card, pouring out jugs of water into a river. I'm going to show you from a different deck here. This is the Thoth deck, which is a much more popular and common deck, but a fantastic deck. You can see very clearly there the woman pouring out the jugs of water with, of course, a starry background. In the deck I'm using for this series, you can see not only the star, but all of the planets that are lined up there in this great starry field, which emanates from her own hair. I thought that was kind of good. And at the bottom here, you see the river, the flower, and the flower and the bee. And this is the entrance to the Holy of Holies. So what it's saying is you're at that moment in the star is the beginning of a trilogy, the star, the moon, and the sun, where you're now entering into this path towards the Holy of Holies, the awakening. It represents a process that usually only takes a very short time to occur when you're talking about awakening. But it can take a very long time in the sense of how this same process applies to a lot of other elements in one's life. The first step, the step of the star, is a card, an image of purification. So the card shows this kind of element that you imagine that this woman is bathing in some way, even though she's not usually depicted pouring the water on herself as much as just pouring it out into the river. But you still get this sense of a purifying that occurs. There's another more esoteric or hidden imagery of that, which is the idea of cleansing and preparing a corpse for funeral rites. And this is because you can have this image of the death, the devil, and the tower as this symbolic dying. And so now this is the funerary procession, with the sun card being this kind of resurrection. And of course it's not meant to be the literal context of that, but in the esoteric context of a reawakening, a rebirth. So what is the woman pouring out? The woman of the star is pouring out all of herself, every last drop. This is what's required to be able to get to that state of awakening, is a complete surrender. If you hold back even one piece, if you aren't willing to make this total letting go, this total relaxation, this total surrender, then that one piece you hold back will be what damns you could say. It keeps you and falls you back into this cycle of destruction. You repeat the whole tower scenario all over again. And it can't be faked. It has to be a true relaxing, a true surrender. You can't just say you're going to do it. It has to be this moment where, after many moments of facing this same challenge and perhaps failing, you say this surrender that is so heartfelt, that is so total, that it becomes something completely different. Why do you give all yourself? Well, you give all yourself to renew the world and to renew yourself. there's this formula, this spiritual formula of what you could call the formula of the Christ, the formula of the Buddha, where there is this letting go of all of oneself, that you then become the light of the world, right? But there's also another formula, which is this formula of you becoming a light to yourself that is a part of the fabric of God, of the divine. So the teacher, the master, is someone who has transcended death on the one hand and transcended the limitedness of the self on the other. The imagery of water and the imagery of the star are connected to each other, because just as you have this vast sea, you have this vast sea of heaven, as above, so below. And this sea of heaven is full of stars, and these stars flow and shift, though too slow for us to see them, but we know that to be true. And water has this quality of surrender to it. It has this quality where it flows, always trying to follow this path of least resistance, always trying to flow downwards, always trying to reach the great sea. The water is contrasted by the heavenly fire, the heavenly light of the star. And the star burns with all of its intensity, with all of its brightness. And it can only burn when it has been freed of the restriction. When the water has reached the sea, then the star can burn with all of its fullness. So the star card is a card in the general sense about being able to purify yourself, to cleanse yourself by this complete letting go. And it's a letting go that depends on this deep sincerity and on a wanting to be free of what prevents that inner star from shining, right? That inner star from coming out, that light within yourself, and the light unto yourself, and that light to the world. In your daily life, the star is a card that reminds you that you can't make it to a state of well-being when you're in a state of division within yourself, when you're holding something back. You can't be total if you're clinging. And if you choose to cling, then you're choosing restriction, and you can hold on to that. That's your free choice, right? But then you can't be surprised when there isn't that totalness. If you give that totalness, it's a surrender and abandonment. It feels like you're losing something, like you're giving up, right? You're saying, I quit. But in fact, this is what allows the opportunity for the miraculous to come in and transform. So first there is that feeling of loss, right? You give up your fantasies, you give up your hopes, you give up your dreams, you give up your effort. But then there is this discovery that comes along the way, this rebirth, this light, and this awakening. Between that, though, there is a darkness, there is this abyss, which is the theme of the moon card, which will be the one that we cover next.